I'm totally not ready for the show today. We're a little late. We're 3 minutes late. Welcome to the Ultra Live Show. I'm Andy, and that's Maeve over there. And we were supposed to be on at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's now 2:02 Eastern. We were just looking at pictures of our dogs, and it's not fair. Well, of my dog, and then
typical.
Yeah, it's not fair though. Maeve suggested that we do a show and tell next week, and I am for it. So, Maeve, how many? You have one dog?
Yeah, we have one dog.
Okay.
We have a dog. I have a dog cousin who lives very close.
Dogsin?
I guess I would. Dogsin?
Yeah.
He's my aunt and uncle's dog, who's also my dog's brother. It's a whole family affair with us.
Awesome. And it's an Australian Labradoodle?
Australian Labradoodle.
Okay.
Very, very, very cute.
We have
They just turned 10.
Oh, 10. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, they're still sprightly. There's still some puppy in them, so that makes me happy.
Well,
yeah.
that's what I've heard. So we have a Jack Russell mix, and she's 9. And then we have our Labradoodle. She's not an Australian Labradoodle. She's just a bog standard F1B Labradoodle. And she is 13 months old. No, 14 months old. And she is a terror sometimes.
So cute.
She's awesome, but she's also like, I'll just walk out and she like grabbed a book off the shelf and she's just chewing on it. It's like, what are you doing? How did?
No way.
Yeah, and it's like it was just random little like magazine type books that don't really matter. But then other times she's just like the sweetest, like wants to just cuddle with you. So I don't know. We had a dog trainer for her, and that helped a lot. And the dog trainer said, like as we were going through training with her, she said that doodle pups in particular, their heads are like washing machines. Like they're just constantly going round and round and round, and like occasionally they'll stop and you like be fine, but then they're just going round and round and round. I was like, oh my gosh, that is Maggie to a T. Have you had your dog for the entire 10 years?
Yeah, we have. So I'm like trying to think back. We did have a trainer at one point. He wasn't as crazy, as it sounds. Like he wasn't grabbing books off the shelf or stuff, but he definitely, got into the trash and stuff. I mean, he still will, if you leave treats on the table and we like go out for a walk, he'll like eat it out of spite. Because he's like, I can't believe you left me. And then
it's your fault, Mom. Sorry.
Exactly.
You did this to me. You made me do this.
Exactly. So we always, whenever we leave the house, we're always like, okay, is everything off the counter? Hide it. Anything. Will he like almonds? We don't know. Let's just put it in the shelf. Like, we don't know. It's a toss up.
Will he like almonds? I think that's the quote of the day. My brother. So labs are great because you get this with an Australian Labradoodle too. They're incredibly intelligent. They're incredibly loyal. We had her. So Luna, our 9-year-old, she was a stray, and we got her from the Humane Society when she was 2, and she's just been the most loyal dog ever. To the point of like she's a guard dog. Like she just barks at everything that comes near the house sometimes, which is super annoying. But like we didn't know how Maggie, our Labradoodle, was going to do, and then we had her off the leash trained in like 3 months.
Wow.
Easy. Like we don't have a fence in our backyard yet.
Yeah.
And we can just like, I can open the door and just go out there and sit, and she's close. Like she just wants to be near us. And occasionally she'll like chase stuff, but she always like there was one time I remember I was in the back playing with her, like throwing ball or rope or something. And then my wife got home. And so she ran around to the front of the house to go say hello to my wife. Like she heard the car. And so she ran around to the front of the house. And I was like, Maggie, come. And so then she poked her head back around the house and looked at me. And was like, I'm going to go over here, Dad. And then like left. And she didn't say that, but she just kind of looked at me and like, and then left. And then my wife didn't see her. And so I was just still out back with our other dog, Luna. My wife came in, never saw Maggie, shut the door. And so I was back there for like 5 minutes and walked inside like 5 minutes later. I was like, hey, wait a minute, where's Maggie? Like immediately you're like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. Where is Maggie? Yeah. And so we're freaking out. And she's like 6 or 7 months old at the point. Like, oh my gosh, we just lost a dog. And
Oh my
so
gosh. Yeah.
I'm like getting my phone, like I'm getting my everything, like getting ready to go find her, go run the neighborhood. And I open the garage door and she's just sitting there in the garage, just waiting for me to open the door. Just like, oh, hey, what's going on? Hey, you guys
Oh,
ready for me to come in?
you're
Yeah.
here.
And she's just like tail wagging, just like looking at the door. It was
Yeah.
like,
Oh my gosh.
that's pretty cool. Uh,
That's so sweet.
yeah.
Yeah. My dog, our dog is really loyal, but he's loyal to my dad.
Hmm.
So if he'll go wherever my dad goes,
Hmm.
and so when he was younger, not as much any, if my dad left, he would like try to follow my dad.
Yeah.
And so I definitely lost him one time.
Oh my gosh. I want to hear that story. Let's save it for next week when we do show and
Yeah,
tell. But
I'll tell you that story.
I want to hear that story definitely. We were going to do recommendations. I recommend you listen to the show next week because we're going to do show and tell with our dogs. There we go. Case closed. I was going to do something with mice and with all sorts of other stuff, but like computer mice, not animal mice. Yeah. So, welcome to the Ultra Live Show, where we routinely talk about pets and coffee, and then occasionally we'll talk about Ultra Live, and occasionally, double occasionally, we'll talk about things that are church adjacent. And one of those things today is kind of spurring on the heels of a blog post that our CEO Stephanie and I think Maeve, you helped write it as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we wrote it together.
Yeah. Maeve was ghostwriting it for Stephanie. Let's put it that way.
No, Stephanie definitely like fleshed it out. I just added some fun stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Fun stuff because this is a real fun topic. Let me tell you.
Stephanie's piece.
Yeah. The the idea today is that we're going to be talking about online church. And in this sort of thing that is not centered, that is driving me nuts here. Here, I got to center it while we're talking because I can do that. There we go.
Okay.
We're actually we're going to talk about this blog post that is called "Why Aren't People Coming to My Services Anymore?" or "Why Aren't People Coming to My Services?" And it has to deal with the fact that online church service all across the country is down, all across the world is down. The numbers are coming out over the last 3, 4, 5 months, and you're hearing a lot of digital people, a lot of online churches specifically, but even a lot of digital event people talk about the fact that people aren't coming to online events anymore, and that includes the church services. And so we kind of wanted to have a very frank, honest conversation about that. Not because we're worried about our platform. I think we need to talk about that up front. Like we're not worried about Ultra Live. We're not worried about online church because we're still seeing people get their lives transformed by Jesus in an online capacity week in and week out all over the place. So it has nothing to do with that. It has more to do with the fact that it doesn't seem to have that same oomph that it had in the pandemic. And so Maeve, I kind of want to open the conversation with you. Like we have a couple of points here and we can kind of run through those points, but when we first start talking about why aren't people coming to our online services, like what's the first thing that hits you when we ask that question?
I mean, like for the first, I think there's a lot of talk about like, oh, maybe it's because people are going to in-person church and like, maybe that is a reason, but you have to realize that sometimes that online church has become a group's only way of community expression. So you can't completely, throw that ideas are open, and it's not being in person, in a brick and mortar building is not the only way of worship anymore. And so first recognizing that is really important. But then you kind of move into almost like a technical side of like thinking of how you want your service to flow or what kind of things you're offering or what you could be doing in preparation before the actual service. So when we're talking about these points, we're thinking about you kind of thinking about your service in a new way from a marketing standpoint, a topic standpoint, and like a flow standpoint.
Yeah. So let's go through these points then. Let's start with kind of the
Yeah.
first point that was in this blog. And if you're interested in reading this blog, the link is in the doodly doo below. You can actually click it and kind of read through exactly what's going on, and you can follow along with us because this is a take home test. So the first point that you will be graded on this later. The first point that popped up was that one of the reasons that people aren't coming to your online services anymore is that people didn't know the event was actually happening. And this
Right.
is, as Maeve just said, a marketing issue. One of the biggest things I see as a church leader is that churches are awful at marketing. Absolutely terrible. They think that a post on social media, one post, or something that somebody put in a bulletin, which nobody looks at bulletins anymore, they think that a post in a bulletin or a church, or even worse, a live announcement from the platform is gonna mean that your event is gonna be the most populated thing ever. And those days are gone, are long gone. Maeve, how do we fix this? Or how do we identify the problem even more?
Right. I think you have to start thinking about repetition.
Yep.
I've heard this, you have to see something at least 3 times for it to stick in your brain. And I think as, marketing and social media people, we almost have to work a little bit harder than that, not just 3 times, maybe even definitely more than that, because there's so much, like the market is so saturated with all these posts and email campaigns, flashy designs. We have, that great website software Canva. Like, you're always seeing really like a pop of color to help get the events to come through, or whatever's happening on your schedule. And you really have to work to stand out. And it could be through social media. It totally could. I follow a bunch of churches and they do a really good job of doing social media. But it also could be a little bit more personal than that. When we talked to Mount Virtual, they talked about personal invites. So when you're hosting, even if it's a regular Sunday service, take that extra time to maybe email people individually, or send out a group, a community-wide email, but make it look like it's, a personal thing, because, doing it to everyone, that could take some time. But taking that extra step to write out a personal invitation is like, we're having a service this time. We'd love for you to come. Here's the link below. Because I think having that notification in your inbox that's like specifically for you, and not just like a social media blast, which is also helpful, so don't completely negate that, it might really help. And also, like I said before, repetition, posting on social media, sending out a group-wide email, and then as you get closer to the service, maybe do the personal invites. Just really creative ways of getting your message across.
That's a great point, the repetition point, but also
Yeah.
that was probably the biggest thing that I took away, and we talked about it last week. The biggest thing that I took away from the interview with Lanika from the Mount Virtual, and you can go back in our playlist right before this video and check that out if you're interested. But they're a fairly large church and have a fairly large online presence, 200 to 300 people in their Sunday morning services, which is fairly large. And the way they get people to not only come to their events, but to sit in rows and sit in their services is to personally invite them. I thought that was so interesting. And that has kept coming up in my week as we've been talking about a couple events that are coming up for the church I work for in August, September, and into Christmas as well. Like, we're already planning for Christmas. And one of the things is that we need to enable our church to actually have language around personal invitations, instead of feeling like the church is just going to handle everything for them and just kind of, we'll make sure that everything is staffed and all this other stuff. That's not what the church is. Like, and not just our church, but capital C church. Capital C church is it's a participant sport. Everybody's involved. Everybody should be pulling their weight doing something, and that includes invitation. Online, one of the language things that we've been putting around all of our stuff is, you don't know what a share could do. You don't know what one simple invite, one simple link copied onto somebody's profile or copied into their timeline or texted to them. You don't know the impact that could have in their eternal life. Not just their like an hour on a Sunday or an hour on a Wednesday or whatever, but their eternal transformation if they meet the Lord and they start to kind of work their salvation out. So, Maeve, I think that is a completely awesome one.
Right. And I think people want to make that argument that how personal can you get online? But, through those personal invitations and taking those extra steps to really reach out to the people in your community, that's how you can do that. And I think it works really, really well.
Definitely. Cool. The second big
Yeah.
reason that we come up against then is that people went to a similar event such as yours, like maybe a church service or a concert or a trivia night or something, and it either wasn't compelling or it was a bad experience. And you kind of touched on this in your intro when you talked about technical issues. So walk me through some of the things that you, especially in support, that you've been doing some of those roles. What are you hearing from people?
Right. Well, I think this is an engagement issue of
Oh,
not knowing how to engage with your audience. I think, people could make the argument that oh, I didn't like the message or something. But, I think no matter where you go, in person, online, there might be some things you hear that you don't like. But I think this is more specifically an engagement issue of people holding an online church service, but not knowing how to make those personal connections. And we've talked a lot about this this past year about how to go out of your way to make those personal connections during an online service, whether it's the chat, whether it's, utilizing the rows and the tables and really encouraging people to have those face-to-face connections. I think, and when it comes to a similar event, maybe you're not mixing it up enough. Maybe it's becoming a little too routine, because I think when we're online, our attention spans can be even shorter, and especially not taking the time to think of oh, maybe we've done this maybe too much, this routine too much. Is there any way we could mix it up? Maybe throw them into rooms and maybe have just a moment for discussion. I know it might interrupt your flow of your usual sermon and service, but maybe adding that level of, wake your congregation up a little bit and have those interactions rather than people passively watching content.
That's good. I'm bringing a little music in behind this, by the way, so just don't get freaked out if you're hearing.
Yeah,
something.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, just to give it a little ambient. I've got my diffuser back here. It's kind of like there's a concert going on. Yeah, I agree. I agree with the engagement one. I think this one bleeds well into the next topic, though, and that is that the topic that they are presenting or the video that they're doing could have been done as an on-demand video. A lot of what I see in particular is that people are like, live's the thing. And then when you get people live in front of a camera, or you get a group of people live in front of a camera, a lot of times people are not skilled communicators, or they're not able to disseminate the information they want to disseminate. And so they ramble. And there's bad glitches, there's bad tech, there's things that immediately pull people right out of the experience. And you get unskilled communicators, you get an unskilled audience, you get bad tech, and any one of those pulls somebody out, but all three of those combined lead people to never want to go to something like your event again. One of the ways that has seemed for me to mitigate that is to practice with live video and live audio, to stop saying ums and ahs and really to be cognizant of that stuff, but also to do on-demand video, which allows you to do a couple things. You can edit for time, you can edit for speed and pacing. It's not tough to edit video. It doesn't have to be super over-the-top YouTube, amazing 4K quality. A lot of times people are used to lower quality video as long as the message and the point is there. But I think outside of just the video editing, it also allows you to control the message a little bit more, and it allows you to have engagement points, and it allows you as the host, as the greeter, as the church, as the whatever, to really organize a little bit more, so that when you do present to your people, it doesn't look like this unorganized jumble of chaos, and instead it's a streamlined thing that people can come out of and go, oh, the timing on that was good. The message was good. Everybody seemed to know what they were doing. I felt welcome and I felt at home. What do you think?
Yeah, I think those are really, really good points. But my only question with that is like, how do you know? Like, do you go about it topic wise? Do you go about it maybe like what's most efficient? Because you're talking about those technical elements of like, okay, maybe it's our our first time, but and or there's a lot of things up in the air, but you think it would be easier to go live and it becomes a mess. But like the topic is really good and you really want it to be live. Like, how do you balance that of like, when do you decide what is good on demand and live? Like, do you know how to balance that?
I do, just because I've been doing that for years, and that sounds very haughty, and I don't mean it to. What one of the things that so whenever I do consulting with any churches or anything, what I tell them is, when in doubt, go on demand first. When in
Mm,
doubt, err towards the side of pre-recording. And people go,
okay.
well, that's not how church is, and I go, you're right, but you're doing things online,
Right.
and unless you have a drilled team, a highly skilled a number of people, including audio engineers, unless you have all of that already in place that knows what they're doing and you've trained and you've done all those things, do on demand events and services and video whenever possible. It takes way less
Mm,
manpower or woman power. It takes way less person power. It takes it obviously takes more time, yes, but time is something that you, as one or two or four people, can sacrifice versus having a live service with 50 to 100 people show up and 75 of them go, this sucks. Like, I don't
mm,
want any part of this, and then never come back. So you
right.
sacrifice the time to make sure that the message is appropriate, cleaned up, looks good, feels good, does all the things that you want it to accomplish, and then you kind of feed the wheel.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, because I think people want to go live for a lot of different reasons, and I think one of them is like having that feel of like, oh, we're doing this all together at the same time. But at the end of the day, you're going to be doing this together at so many different times. Like, you have to meet people where they're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's not always can always be on your terms and
The,
what like you think is
one of the
best.
one of the one of the pushback things I always hear, like, there is a time and a place for live. I will say that. Like, if
Hmm.
you're going to do a small group, you referenced it up front. If you're going to do a group study, if you're going to do something like that with a smaller group of people,
Right.
definitely you want to be live. That's the only way you're going to get that main
Right.
engagement point. But if it's something like an event or something, like a live church service, one of the things I always tell people is the only things that work live nowadays are sporting events. And that is
Mm.
because millions and millions and millions of dollars go into that. All of those teams are well drilled and all of those other things. There's a reason you don't see sitcoms live. There's a reason that you barely, like, awards shows are always pretty crap. There's a reason that most other live things, even game shows, are all pre-recorded. There's a reason
Yeah.
for that. The reason is it allows you to control the message. It allows you to control the
Mm.
look, feel, the engagement points, all of those things. And you're not manipulating your church. You're not manipulating your congregation. What you're doing instead is removing any of the barriers that are going to push people away from your service. Because if I as a church leader can even take my iPhone and record a 15-minute message, just put it up here and record a 15-minute message looking into my iPhone, and then I pull it down and I record it with iMovie on my phone, which is free, and then I
Mhm.
post that video. That already, and, I can get rid of the ums, the ahs, the bloops, the clicks. I can get rid of if my dog barks. I can do all those things in post that would take me relatively short. That is essentially removing a barrier to people hearing the gospel. And our job as
Mm.
church leaders, as pastors, as mentors, as video directors, as whatever, is to remove as many barriers as possible. So this one I'm super passionate about. If you couldn't
Yeah,
tell.
and no, it's great. Yeah. What I wanted to say is that when you're, even if it's like a pre-recorded service, you're still all together
Yep.
at the same time, especially on Ultra Live, because you're living life together in the now. Sure, you're watching a pre-recorded service, but it's also about being with people in real time. And with Altar Live, you can do that with the rows and the tables and the rooms. So yeah, that's a really good point. A really good
100,
point.
100%. I completely
Yeah.
agree. Let's move to the last one, the last point here.
Mhm.
And it's the fact that the event itself, one of the reasons people don't come to your church services is at the event itself. So we get rid of all of the other stuff that people know what's happening. It could be done as a live thing. They didn't go to a similar experience, and it was what was not bad for them.
Right.
One of the main reasons people don't come to your church service is that it's not relevant to them right then, or not relevant ever. And this one hit me very, very hard. Maeve, where do we talk about this one? Like, where do we even start with this one?
Yeah, it's really hard because, you think of like your usual Sunday service and you're thinking like, well, of course it needs to be it's relevant to everyone because we're like it's the Bible. Like we can always find, where we belong in the Bible and we can always relate to what's happening in the Bible. So this made me think like I think of maybe like special events that you have with your church. I mean, it could be a Sunday service if you're going through a certain series that maybe isn't hitting home as well as you thought. But when I first saw this, I was thinking, okay, this might be, one of those special events that you have for a certain demographic. I'm thinking I can't like the first thing that comes to mind, but I think it would be relevant is like maybe it's like a marriage one, but I feel like that would be relevant. But maybe there was like a speaker that you thought was really gonna like hit home, but it didn't. So I think, and it's different for every community. So you really have to think yourself as a church leader. Like, do you know your community well enough? Like, do you know the people who are coming to your church service? Do you know the demographics that you have? And, like, do you know what they need? Like, I think that can be the first question that you ask yourself if you're maybe thinking it has to do with the topic of the event. Have you ever, like, experienced this where, like, oh, maybe this topic we were talking about was gonna like really hit home and then it didn't? Like, have you had that experience?
Oh yeah, and that's part of church, unfortunately. Like, yeah, that's how you learn your community. One of the things in here was one of the questions that we should talk about is, do you know what your community needs? And that's how you learn what your community needs, is by swinging and missing. I mean, you as a church leader should know. You should have been living in community with your people enough to know what's going to speak to them and what's not going to speak to them anyway. But even if you don't, you're going to swing and miss every once in a while. And there is grace involved, fortunately. And you can't take it you can't take a lump when you feel like you might have just ruined someone's eternal glory and all this other stuff. Because like, we have to understand that God is bigger than just our little simple screw ups. And if God wants to work, then God's going to work. But also we need to know that we need to continue to innovate and try new things. Church is an action verb. It is an action moving forward verb. And we need to continually be moving forward in what we're doing, saying, acting, looking like, feeling, all those other things, because our culture is constantly doing that. And so we need to be able to try things with the caveat that they may fail, and then we just don't do those again, or we come back to them in 2 to 3 to 5 years or whatever. The other big way that kind of what's going to work is you look at other churches, and you don't copy them, but start to look at what other churches around you and then around kind of your culture group. So if you're in the United States, start looking at churches that are in your same world. Like if you're a Southern church, like, and it's not a stereotypical thing. It's not a biased thing. It's simply that communities around the country and then communities around the world even are going to have similar thoughts at the same time. And so looking at what's working with them is actually it's a bit of research that's going to help you innovate, and then they're going to look at you and then they're going to innovate. And so it's kind of the leapfrog thing, not for competition, but because we're all trying to move the kingdom forward.
Yeah. That's good. I think that can be really hard to kind of realize, like, you may not know your community as well as you think you do. And also kind of thinking, like, okay, who is actually my community and what do they need? Like that's a really, really big question because sometimes maybe they think they need something and they actually don't and you know better. I don't know. I think it's just an interesting conversation to have and it's definitely like a continuous exploration.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and not only that, but with Altar Live, we give you the tools to kind of do all this stuff, to continue to innovate and all that. And maybe you don't want to have rows of people. Maybe you just want to do a live stream. Cool. Maybe you want to open up tables and actually talk to people. Cool. Maybe you just want to open a room and have a group of people. Cool. Try it. Go for it. You've got this big, beautiful sandbox that you can play in. Go, do, try, be free, and do your thing. I don't know. I feel like a dad. Like, hey, go explore the world just a little bit. That's kind of exactly what we are trying to do with Altar Live in this instance. Maeve, I'm looking at the rest of this stuff, and I think we kind of hit everything. Is there anything we're missing right now?
I don't think so. I know we touched on like all of these issues, especially the one when it's talking about, okay, like it wasn't very compelling or a bad experience. Like we're not talking about your church. We're talking about the event itself. It's not saying that like, oh, because you taught this and because you said this and quoted this Bible verse or theologian means like you're having a bad experience. We're talking about like the event itself, the structure, and maybe the technical aspects. We just want to be really clear on that because we're not talking about the message that you're getting across. It's more of like how you're doing it with the tools that we provide.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would love to hear from you wherever you are, whomever you are. Not only how you're using Altar Live, but if you have thoughts on why you think people are not coming to your services, or you want to slap us and say, hey, we've got millions of people coming to my service every single week, and we're going to write back to you and go, cool, go to altarlive.com and sign up for a free trial today because we would love to help you out in everything that you're doing. But in all seriousness, we would love to open this conversation with you. We can talk about dogs if you want, but also we can talk about the fact that online church it's not going anywhere, and we just need to be able to serve our community and serve the kingdom in as good a format as possible. Maeve, before we sign off, any closing words to our wonderful, loyal, amazing Altar Live fam?
If you have a dog, hug your dog tight today and have a wonderful weekend.
Oh, that was very heartfelt. I really like that. I'm going to go out as soon as we get done. I'm going to take my headphones off and I'm going to go take both my dogs and just do this. The problem is,
I love it.
The problem is the Labradoodle, the young one, gets super jealous if I hug the older one. And so she doesn't get jealous. She just like, if I go to hug the smaller one, she immediately just puts her face right here and just like, oh my gosh, Dad, kiss me and love me. And it's like, I don't know what to do with you right now, Maggie.
You just spread the love equally, I guess.
I usually just end up pushing her like this and keeping her at arm's length because she just likes to lick you. And then I let her do her thing. Anyway.
Oh my gosh, she sounds so cute.
She's amazing. And also she's dumb. So
you love him though. You love him
their dumbness. I can't imagine life without him. But hey, everybody, we're going to stop waxing poetic about our dogs. We love you. We'll see you next week. Have an amazing, amazing weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.